Today, we're tackling something huge, a cornerstone of India's justice system that honestly is often overshadowed by the Supreme Court but affects millions of us directly. We're diving deep into the Indian High Courts.
So let me just start by asking you a question. If your fundamental rights are violated, say by a state authority, who's your first and most powerful line of defense? You might immediately think of the highest court in the land, but there's a guardian of your rights that's much, much closer to home. And that guardian is the High Court of your state. See, these institutions are specifically designed to be accessible, to be powerful, and to be absolutely vital in holding the government accountable and protecting our individual liberties.
So to really get a grip on their power today, we've got to look at where they came from. Because, these courts aren't some new invention. They have some seriously deep historical roots.
I mean, just look at this timeline. We're talking deep roots here. The very first high courts were set up way back in 1862. So when India was framing its own constitution, the founders didn't just decide to keep them, they actually strengthened them, cementing them as the absolute backbone of justice in every single state.
And their real power? Well, it comes directly from the Constitution itself. Articles 214 to 231 lay out the whole shebang. They're called a court of record, which is a fancy way of saying their judgments are final and authoritative. But the key thing to remember is this. They aren't just any ordinary court. They are the constitutional guardians for the entire state.
Okay, so what's in their toolkit? What tools do they actually have to enforce justice? This is where it gets really, really interesting, because their powers are incredibly broad and, frankly, super impactful.
One of their most powerful tools is something called writ jurisdiction. Now, the easiest way to think of a writ is like a direct, unavoidable command from the High Court to any person or authority in the state, ordering them to do something or maybe to stop doing something, all to protect a citizen's rights.
Now, get ready for this, because here's a fact that surprises a lot of people. We all assume the Supreme Court has the ultimate power, right? But when it comes to writs, the High Court's power is actually broader. You see, the Supreme Court can only issue writs when fundamental rights are violated. But the High Court, it can do that, plus issue them for any other purpose. A little phrase that covers a massive range of other legal wrongs. And it doesn't even stop there. Oh no. Under Article 227, the High Court has supervisory power over every single court and tribunal in the state. So yeah, they are basically the quality control managers for the entire justice machine, making sure everything is running properly from both a judicial and an administrative perspective.
But let's be real, a court is only as good as its judges. So how are these powerful gatekeepers chosen? And maybe more importantly, how is their independence protected from, political influence?
Well, the answer is a pretty unique mechanism called the collegium system. Now, this isn't something that was written into the Constitution. It's a system the judiciary basically created for itself through some landmark judgments, all based on one core idea, that judges are the best people to select other judges, keeping the whole process separate from politics.
So, while the President of India is the one who officially makes the appointment, the actual recommendation comes from this small group of very senior judges. The collegium for a High Court judge includes the top judges from the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice from that specific High Court, which ensures you get both a national perspective and local expertise.
Okay, so that's how they get in. But what about getting them out? This is a really critical question when we talk about independence. I mean, how do you fire a High Court judge if things go wrong?
And the short answer is, you pretty much don't. The architects of the Constitution made the removal process incredibly difficult, and they did it on purpose. This security, this tenure, is the absolute bedrock of judicial independence. It lets judges make tough calls without fearing political backlash. I mean, just look at this process. It is a political and procedural mountain to climb. You need a motion signed by tons of MPs, a whole investigation by a judicial committee, and then a special 2/3 majority vote in both houses of parliament. It's so hard that no High Court judge has ever actually been removed this way.
But, no system is perfect. And right now, the Indian judiciary is standing at a major crossroads, facing a huge debate about its structure, its efficiency, and its future.
And at the absolute heart of the problem is this number. Just let it sink in for a second. Over 5,000. That's the number of judicial vacancies in the lower courts, the ones supervised by the High Courts. This kind of shortage, it leads to crushing backlogs and delays, and it denies timely justice to millions.
So one of the biggest solutions being talked about is the creation of an All-India Judicial Service, or AIJS. The basic idea is to have one centralized national exam, kind of like the one for civil servants, to recruit judges for all the lower courts across the whole country.
But this idea, it's really controversial. On one side, supporters say it would create a uniform high standard, fill those vacancies way faster, and make selection totally merit-based. But on the other side, opponents have serious concerns. They worry it tramples on state autonomy, that you'll get judges who don't know the local language, and that high courts would lose critical control over the judges below them. It's that classic push and pull between centralization and federalism.
So, after all of that, why does the structure of the high court system actually matter to you and me? Let's boil it all down to the absolute essentials. All right, here are your big takeaways. First, high courts are your #1 defenders against government overreach in your state. Second, their writ power is incredibly broad, even broader than the Supreme Court's, making them a potent tool for justice. Third, their independence is fiercely protected by the Constitution. And finally, the whole system is under a lot of strain, and big debates about reforms are happening right now.
You know, this quote really just captures the whole thing perfectly. Without strong, independent high courts, the checks and balances that a democracy absolutely depends on, well, they just can't function properly at the state level. And that really leaves us with the central question that's driving this entire debate today. It's a really delicate balancing act, isn't it? How can we reform the judiciary to make it more efficient and accountable without weakening the very independence that's so vital for protecting democracy and all of its citizens?
It's a question with no easy answers, but it's one that will absolutely define the future of justice in India. Thanks so much for joining us on The Explainer.